We were very lucky in that it was a very wet period. There was always financial pressure because there wasn't very much money coming in, but the fact that they were dairying and fed pigs on the skim milk, that kept that income coming. It was a very tough exercise to budget. We were very lucky in that my mother was keen on that sort of thing and able to do that, but a lot of the people weren't and ended up in trouble.
The crops were fairly good. Dad started growing wheat in 62 and he finished in 79, and he never missed a crop in that time. It was a lucky run of seasons for the start of the soldier settlement. If the seasons had been like they were now, the soldier settlement would have failed. There's no doubt about that, because a lot of blokes dairied and you needed green feed for your dairy.
Dad drew the block in 54, but he was farming with his father in Kingaroy, and he couldn't take up full residence in Wandoan. So he went down. See, they'd take it off you if you didn't comply to the conditions. So Dad went down. He knew Joe Peterson because he had a farm not far from him in Kingaroy. He was a Minister for Lands, and he went down to see him. And they said, go away and write us a letter. And Dad said if he'd have done that, that would have been the end of it. They would have said, you know, you're out. So he said, give me a pen and paper and I'll write it here now. And they gave him a bit of extension. So Dad was coming backwards and forwards from Kingaroy over here, and Judy, my sister, she's 8 years older than me, and Mum and I was 2. We came out in 56.
The highway was there, but it was a gravel road and all the rest of it. And this road was still, well, it was passable, but that was about all it was, because there was, you know, suckers and all that growing up around it. And anyhow, Mum wasn't all that great of a driver, but so Dad walked in front of it, just, you know, saying there's a stump here or something like that. And the mission was to find a place where they could set up camp and all the rest of it. And the road teed off down to a dam that the government had put in, and it was a fairly sharp turn, and Dad directed Mum to go around the corner, but Mum cut the corner a bit short, and there was a little sucker-type tree that she hooked the back mudguard of the whole wagon thing underneath it, and there was the stuff they had in the back was sort of from the back of the vehicle to the front of the vehicle on top of people and all the rest of it, and it created a bit of havoc. But the main mission of that particular day was to pick a site for the home sort of thing, and they picked this site and they imagined that it was on top of the hill.
All we wanted to do was explore the place, because it was virtually only a shed that we moved into. It was brand new, but it was just one big room. And I can remember putting blankets up for walls. And it was in the winter time, I can remember that. It was damn cold.
There was a bit of a hut there that Dad had built, and with a dirt floor, and when we were going to sleep in there the first night, there was a hell of a big brown snake in there. So we slept in the back of the truck.
There was 2 particular wilga trees that were strategically placed just the right distance apart and all that, and they put a rail in there and strung this tarp up over it, and that was it. And then they decided to build a hut, and yeah, the roof went up and probably 3 walls went up. Then the rain started, I think, and things got a bit difficult, and they had to put some floor in because it was impossible to walk around in the mud. But there was a hessian wall and all this sort of stuff, and that was just our way of life, and we didn't think anything different of it. And
yeah, it was really wet. I know 56 was a hell of a wet year. Really hard to keep. I was only just walking, and that hard to keep me dry, you know.
Troom Road bus, which was, it was an education itself, that bus. I spent all 10 years in Wandoan.
I think from memory I used to have to leave at 7:20 to catch the bus, and I didn't get home till about 4:45 in the evening. Because there's so many stops along the way, the bus took a long time to get to town and get back again.
We had to walk about 3/4 of a mile to catch the school bus.
Boys on one side, the seats, one at each side, and the middle seat had a row each side.
Canvas roof over, the seats were a long ways in it.
And on our particular bus, there was 84 kids, and I think it was a 30-seater bus. At that particular time, there wasn't a real lot of bitumen around, and you know, with dirt roads and closed-in canopies and all that, the dust all comes in.
The only thing that my mother could see when I came home from school was white eyes and white teeth. The rest of it was very dark.
Yeah, Freddie Worth was the bus driver, and he was one of the slowest bus drivers, but he'd be one of the safest. It used to take, sometimes, you know, in the winter time, it'd be 5 o'clock before I got home, it'd be dark, you know. We were really well behaved in the classroom. Nobody was game to do anything, but the bus was an absolute disaster.
A couple of boys found a truck tyre on the side of the road, and they hatched a plan that, but this was with a new bus driver who was a little bit more lax in his approach. So they, when one fella got out of the bus in the afternoon, he raced and grabbed the tyre and handed it to his mate who was still on the bus, who held it out the window. Then when the bus got over the next hill, going down the hill, he'd let the tyre go, and of course it raced past the bus, and the poor old driver nearly tipped her over because he thought he'd lost the tyre.
We were quite close to the Grossmont school, but we've got a creek running through our place, Mud Creek. So all those people on the northern side of Mud Creek went to Grossmont, and the southern side went to Wandoan, so Judy and I went to Wandoan.
The first few years at Wandoan, every weekend or every Monday morning there'd be an extra 10 kids come to the school as the settler families all started coming together, and the highest that I can remember, there was 460 odd kids at school.
The old headmaster, he was probably the only teacher that ever taught me anything, but he always wore a coat, summer and winter. If he was about and he had his coat on, he always walked with a very stiff arm because there was a lump of lawyer cane up the sleeve.
So I did all my schooling up to grade 10 or junior as it was in those days here at Wandoan. And we were in an era where we virtually went right through school and had a new classroom every year because they were building the school as it expanded.
And when I left the school in Wandoan, there were 404 children and 17 teachers, a teacher aide, a librarian and a cleaner.
Depending on what was going on at the time, after school when I got home I had to go and get the cows in because we weren't dairying at that stage, but we had house cows. So my job was to get the cows in and feed the chooks and make sure they had water.
I'd do homework or whatever while I turned the separator.
Mum come from a dairy farm, and I think she had a little bit of experience with milking cows and all that. And it was, you know, not all that substantial, but it was serviceable. And
Some of the blocks around home, they were homesteads. They were, you know, the country that had been resumed. They had houses and that on them, old homesteads. But our block had no improvements at all except for the government dam. The
first group of settlers, I think there was 32 in that group, 1952. A lot of them had no money at all when they came, not even to buy basic things like crowbars and shovels and axes and that sort of thing, you know. So the Agricultural Bank, in its wisdom, decided to make an advance of £100 to each settler.
Dad sort of, his whole life, he worked pretty hard, and in his earlier days he lived a pretty rough lifestyle.
I don't know, you've seen Dad up the milking sort of thing, and the washing up was done, and he'd disappear, be either stick picking or fencing.
It was all shovel and crowbar.
It rained, I think we had something like 50 odd inches of rain in the year, and for fencing purposes it enabled Dad to cut it, or some kind of a post or something, and actually drive it into the ground just with an axe because it was so wet.
Dad used to do a lot of ring barking.
All the scrub was brand new, and when you ring bark the brigalow scrub, as the trees died, the vegetation that came through was just as good as cultivation.
Yeah, well, we rung bark a lot of country, and because the Lands Department preferred ring barking to the big tractors, because, well, that's what they did in the early days there, and then later on, yeah, they accepted the scrub pulling.
If the bus was 5 minutes late, I'd start pedalling the opposite direction because the dozers would be at home. So
the tractor that we're on, they did the clutch, and he was the inside tractor in the scrub. You know, you'd have one tractor out in the clear that had been pulled and one in the scrub, and the other tractor didn't realise that something had happened. We were getting snigged backwards for quite a long time before he realised that there was trouble there.
oh, I remember one tree I saved. It was over the bore, one tree. Don't let the tractors pull that down like that tree. Just had it. And he saved the tree, got the nines to go around that particular tree. Fortnight later, got hit by lightning and blew it to pieces.
I can remember the one tractor was an old D4 pilot motor start, and I can remember him stick raking. And then the last of it, they were TD25 International.
Yeah, and then the fires, when the scrub was burnt, once it got going, there was a huge cloud that rose up above it, and there was lightning and thunder and everything out of that cloud. Big logs getting swirled around.
Dad always said, because he was an ex-serviceman, shell fire, you know, up in the clouds and the smoke and that.
And we got such a clean burn. A lot of the country didn't have to be stick rake. You could just go straight into it with a plough and plough it up.
Our home place, Dad had actually leased it out fairly early in the piece because he wasn't in a financial position to meet some of the criteria, and the next door neighbour leased the property, and he developed the cultivation. And
there was a bloke with an old tiger moth that was seeding, grass seeding, and a lot of people got their place grass seeded with Rhodes grass and green panic and that sort of thing, all in the ash. And it was quite a dry time, but amazingly we got rain not long after it, and there was green panic and that there you could be on a horse and it was still over your head.
In '62, Dad started farming. He bought his first tractor and plough, and it sort of gradually expanded from there to farming. And in the end, he was growing a reasonable amount of wheat. Yeah, but then we also grew crops to fatten cattle with. So.
And as time went by, he relinquished the lease, and I took up the opportunity of growing my first crop of wheat when he left. And
in '57 it turned into a drought, and I can remember standing on the back of the old truck, and Dad had rigged up a pole across into the windmill and stand on there and pump water by hand because the wind just didn't blow. But yeah, I spent hours there pumping water for the old dairy cows there.
Initially, the first couple of years there was not much social activity, but as we got on after a couple of years, there was a picture theatre in town. There was a hall where they used to have a lot of dances.
Yeah, my mum and dad used to play for a lot of dances here, that sort of thing. So it was great. You'd go to a school dance and your parents were playing. It was exciting. From a night out, he had a piano recording always in the back of the car, so there'd be a fire going and you'd pull up at that and yeah, you wouldn't know what time to get home because he was the music for every show.
About 4 miles from home, they started up a tennis club, and it was a big thing. There was every weekend there'd be, on the Sunday there'd be probably 100, could even be 150 people at the afternoon's tennis sort of thing, and that was the main gathering.
And there's a cricket pitch up above it. It's still there, and 22 yards, and there's only one crack in it. There's a brigalow tree growing alongside it, that much that the cement is growing into the tree, or the tree's growing over the cement.
Some of the soldier settlers were at the forefront of starting the golf club and the bowls club, and put a lot of time and effort into getting them going, and yeah, great social activity for the district.
Dad was always a member of the bowls club, but he never played. And he helped to level the bowling green when it was being constructed with his dumpy level and staff and that, yeah.
At the same, they had the Roachdale Pony Club.
We used to ride across the paddock, and
Pony club and Sunday school in the same hut.
it was a Cobb & Co changing station, wasn't it, originally?
And Mum was a hairdresser. She started hairdressing in Wandoan very early in the piece. Sort of became a women's refuge. I can remember going in there when I was a kid, and it was like the CWA. They were all sitting in the waiting room, having a cup of tea and talking. And
you know, we only had a very basic house to live in, and we had everything we needed. You didn't have all the things you wanted, but you didn't want for anything that you needed.